So this week's Parsha is Parshas Beha'aloscha, page 775 in the Art Scroll Chumash. That's Bamidbar chapter 8, verse 1. And begins talking about the menorah, that Hashem spoke to Moshe, saying, "Speak to Aaron and say to him, when you light the lamps, towards the face of the menorah shall the 7 lamps cast light." So he has instructions how to light the lamps of the menorah. And Aaron did so. Towards the face of the menorah, he kindled the lamps as Hashem had commanded Moshe. This is the workmanship of the menorah, hammered out gold from its base to its flower. It is hammered out according to the vision that Hashem showed Moshe, so did he make the menorah. So the commentaries ask that why does it, we understand the mitzvah of lighting the menorah might be here, but why does it talk about the construction of the menorah? That was already dealt with way back in Parshas Truma. When it talked about the construction of the Mishkan of the tabernacle and all its vessels, they had also discussed the construction of the menorah. So why is that?
The construction or the location?
The construction. They gave very specific instructions how to make it.
Oh, I remember.
So Rav Shimon Schwab answers that if you look at the Haftorah, I should have marked it before. Sorry, I didn't. Beha'aloscha, here we go. So the Haftorah begins on page 1182, but on page 1183, chapter 4, this is from Zechariah, the prophet Zechariah. So page 1153 in the Art Scroll Chumash, chapter 4, it's from the prophet Zechariah, chapter 4. The angel who spoke with me returned and woke me as a man is awakened from his sleep. He said to me, "What do you see?" I said, "I see, and behold, there is a menorah made entirely of gold with bowls on its top, and 7 lamps are upon it. There are 7 tubes to each, and the lamps that are on its top, and 2 olive trees are near it, one to the right, one to his left." And I said, "What is this?" And he told me, "This is telling you that it's not with your own strength that you'll be successful in building the temple and reestablishing the Jewish people in the land of Israel. This is with their return from the Persian and Babylonian exile." And he said, it's with Hashem's spirit that through Bavel, who was one of the leaders of the Jewish people, would be successful. So the Rav Shimon Schwab says that the Medrash says that Hashem. It says that according to the vision that Hashem showed Moshe, so did he make the menorah. Back to us in verse 3, that Moshe made it as the vision that Hashem showed him. And Rav Shimon Schwab said that this vision that Hashem showed him how to make the menorah was that same menorah that the prophet Zechariah saw. That was the menorah of the heavenly temple. And that was the vision that Moshe saw. And he saw the heavenly menorah and saw how to make the physical menorah. And that menorah that he saw was lit. It had the lamps and was lit already. So he says that because that in the instructions for the construction, he saw that it was lit. That was a part of the building of the menorah, was the lighting, that the menorah wasn't completely built without being lit. And therefore, when we discuss the mitzvah for lighting it, we mention also about the construction, because this is really a part of the construction. Okay. Moving on, the next topic is the consecration of the Levian. In verse 5 on page 775, Hashem spoke to Moshe, saying, "Take the Levites from among the children of Israel and purify them. So shall you do to them to purify them. Sprinkle upon them the water of purification, and let them," that's the water with the ashes of the red heifer, and let them, red cow, sorry, and let them pass a razor over their entire flesh, let them immerse their garments, and they shall become pure. So they had a mitzvah to shave all the hair on their body. They shall take a young bull and its meal offering, fine flour mixed with oil, and a second young bull, they bring offerings. And on page 777, "You shall bring the Levites before Hashem, and the children of Israel shall lean their hands upon the Levites." So the Jewish people also participated in consecrating them. "Aaron shall wave the Levites as a wave service before Hashem for the children of Israel. They shall remain to perform the service of Hashem." Remember, there were thousands of Leviim, 22,300.
Well, close enough.
Yes, close enough.
But try waving just one of them.
Yes, and Aaron had to wave all the Leviim, and even if he was leaving all the, okay. So, so this was obviously miraculous, and the Medrash says that this was miraculous, yet Aaron possessed great strength that he was able to do this, because Hashem, there has to be something there for the miracle to take effect on. And it was Aaron, it says, had a great strength, and Hashem gave him a miraculous assist that he was able to wave all the Levim. So now, the Levites shall lean their hands upon the heads of the bulls, and you bring the offerings. And it states in verse 14, so shall you separate the Levim from among the children of Israel, and the Levim shall remain mine. They're Hashem's servants. And it continues in verse 15, thereafter the Levites shall come to serve the tent of meeting. You shall purify them. You shall wave them as a wave service. For presented are they to me from among the children of Israel. Have I taken them to myself? For every firstborn of the children of Israel became mine, of man and livestock. On the day that I struck every firstborn in the land of Egypt, I sanctified them for myself. That when the firstborns were struck in the land of Egypt, so it was only the Egyptian firstborns that were killed. But Hashem is saying that we didn't really deserve to be distinguished from the Egyptians. That while the Egyptians were killed, we were immersed in their culture, assimilated to a large extent in their culture, and assimilated in their idolatry. So our firstborns really didn't deserve to be saved and distinguished from the Egyptians' firstborn. Yes, yet Hashem saved them, and for that reason they were sanctified. And in verse 18, I took the Levites in place of every firstborn among the children of Israel. Then I assigned them to Aaron to assist in guarding the tent of meeting. So that's what they did. And in verse 23, it continues the rules for the Levim doing the service. Hashem spoke to Moshe saying, this shall apply to the Levites. From 25 years of age and up, you shall join the legion of the service of the tent of meeting. From 50 years of age, you shall withdraw from the legion of work and no longer work. So from 25, he joins the legion. And we've seen earlier that it's 30 and it's a 5-year apprenticeship period. So from 25, they work as an apprentice of other Levim. And once they're 30, they're in the regular service of the Levim. And that's until 50. And once they're 50 years of age, so they don't do the regular work of the Levim, but there are some things they could do. Rashi says that they could close the gates. That's like one of the jobs that they could do, the closing of the gates. Okay, and now moving on page 779, chapter 9. Hashem spoke to Moshe in the wilderness of Sinai in the 2nd year from their exodus from the land of Egypt in the 1st month, saying, the children of Israel shall make their Pesach offering in its appointed time. On the 14th day of this month in the afternoon shall you make it in its appointed time. According to all its decrees and laws you shall make it. And Moshe spoke to the children of Israel, and that's what they did. So they did the Paschal offering. And the Ramban says that why is this mentioned here in their 2nd year, really a year after they left Egypt? So he says because even though we were commanded to do it for all generations in Egypt, but they might have thought that's only once they came to the land of Israel. They might have thought that they do it when they're in Egypt, and then they're to do it again when they get to the land of Israel. But they didn't necessarily know they're supposed to do it in the wilderness, so they had a new mitzvah. So they were commanded specifically this year, and throughout the time in the desert, they were to do it. Rashi, though, comments that they only did it that year. That was the only year that the Paschal offering was brought in the desert, because the people did not, because since they were traveling, and as we'll see, they traveled whenever they were pretty much commanded by Hashem. There was a cloud over the Mishkan, over the tabernacle. Whenever it moved, that was a signal for them to start moving, and they never knew when they would have to do that. So they did not circumcise their children, because they were concerned that if they circumcised a son and then the next day it's time to move, that would be dangerous.
Healthy.
Yeah, that's not healthy to be on the move with the baby who just got in a bris milah.
Is there some reason why Hashem just told him move? I mean,
it was part of the entire experience in the desert. The Ramban says was to, and other commentaries as well, was to really to make it a part of the the Jewish DNA of our psyche, to follow what Hashem says without questioning. Is this what I think, or it's not what I think? That we have to, meaning that we're commanded to think, to understand, but not to think, do I agree with this or disagree with this? Okay. Meaning the first thought is, this is what Hashem commands, that's what I'm going to do, and then I try to understand. Yes, but they did not do a bris milah, and travel is dangerous. That I know. So when my youngest Benjamin was when my wife was expecting, so she had some complications with the pregnancy from early on, from like 22 weeks. We were told that she could go into labor at any time. She had a procedure to prevent it, but the doctor told us she could go into labor at any time. So just like don't go too far from home. So she asked the doctor about would I like be able to go to Jacksonville for would I be able to like take the kids to the zoo in Jacksonville? And he said that he thought about it and said like you could go, but make sure check which hospital there has a NICU and which one takes your insurance before you go. And we took that as a no.
Right.
And and when you're dealing with like medical issues, traveling is something you want to stay away from.
Right.
So yeah, you don't want to be stuck, like on the road with a newborn baby, bris or no bris, and especially with right after a bris milah.
Right.
So so they did not do a bris milah, and we're not allowed to do a korban pesach. We're not allowed to bring the paschal offering without a bris milah. So for that reason, they didn't do it the rest of the time in the desert. Okay, so now in verse 6, we have the mitzvah, the beginning of the mitzvah of the Pesach Sheni, of the second Pesach. So there were men, and that's the second annual Pesach, not the second, this year's Pesach was technically the second one. But there were men who had been contaminated by a human corpse and could not make the Pesach offering on that day. So they approached Moshe and Aaron on that day. Those men said to him, we are contaminated through a human corpse. Why should we be diminished by not offering Hashem's offering at its appointed time among the children of Israel? Moshe said to them, stand out and I will hear what Hashem will command you. So they were saying that we were contaminated through a human corpse, as it says. There's a question. We are right, and we would not be able to bring the paschal lamb until we became purified with the ashes of the red cow. So we for that reason, well, it's questionable if the majority of the Jewish people are impure, so there might be room for leniency. But in general, you can't bring and in this case, when everybody was pure, except for them, so they would not be able to bring the paschal offering. And there's a question, why were they impure? Some commentaries say that they were the ones who bore, that it's a disagreement in the Gemara. Some opinions in the Gemara say they were the ones who carried the casket of Yosef, who asked that he be, or he did more than ask, he asked us to swear to take him out when we left Egypt and bring him back to the land of Israel, and we fulfilled the descendants of those who swore that oath fulfilled their oath. So so they were impure by carrying his casket. Other opinions say that we'd previously seen in Parsha Shmini that two of Aaron's sons, Nadav and Avihu, died when they brought a strange fire into the sanctuary. And the Gemara says that these people who were impure were their cousins, who were the ones who took them out of the Mishkan of the tabernacle, so they were still impure. And there's a question in the Gemara as to why would they still be impure? They should have had time to purify. I'll leave it. That's a discussion in the Gemara. But there were these people who were impure through contact with the dead, and they said, we can't bring the paschal offering because we cannot become pure until we can purify ourselves in time. It was an 8-day process. Or a 7-day process. So why can't we? Why should we be diminished because we're impure that we can't bring the paschal offering? And Moshe said, "Stand and I will hear what Hashem will command you." And to this, the Brisker Rav says, he said, I think, about his father, Reb Chaim Soloveitchik, who was the great Torah scholar in Brisk. So he said that whenever they would interview rabbis to be the community rabbi of Brisk, the posek of Brisk. He was the Rosh Yeshiva. So one of the most important thing he looked for was that they're willing to say, I don't know, the question. He said, nobody knows everything. And the Torah is so vast that there's nobody who can answer every single question. And he says that the most important thing is somebody who's pursues the truth, and somebody who will give an answer when they really don't know is not pursuing the truth. They're making themselves look good. So here he says we see even with Moshe, the one who learned the Torah specifically, from Hashem, 40 days and 40 nights twice on Mount Sinai, yet he was asked a question and he said, I don't know, I need to ask. And so Moshe said, stand now, hear what Hashem will command you. And on page 781, Hashem spoke to Moshe saying, speak to the children of Israel, saying, if any man will become contaminated through a human corpse on a distant road, whether you or your generations, you shall make the Pesach offering for Hashem in the second month. That's a month after Pesach. On the 14th day in the afternoon shall he make it. So a month later, with matzahs and bitter herbs shall he eat it. They shall not leave over from till morning, nor shall they break a bone of it. Like all the decrees of the Pesach offerings, they shall make it. So they have to treat it like a regular Pesach. But this is only someone who could not have brought it on time. But if somebody could have but decided not to, for whatever reason, they made a choice not to, so that person does not have this opportunity. And okay, so it's an interesting case because it's not Pesach, so they're allowed to eat chametz on that day on Pesach Sheni. But
Interesting.
yes, it's not really. Even the people who are bringing this offering, they're allowed to eat chametz, but they have to eat the Paschal offering. They have to eat this makeup Paschal offering with matzah and mar. Okay, so now on page 781, verse 15. So on the day the tabernacle was set up, as we discussed, the cloud covered the tabernacle. That was the tent for the testimony. And in the evening, the testimony being the Ark of the Covenant, and the lucha is the tablets that it contained. And in the evening, there would be upon the tabernacle like a fiery appearance until morning, and so it would be. And in verse 17, whenever the cloud was lifted from atop the tent, afterwards the children of Israel would journey, and in the place where the cloud would rest, there the children of Israel would encamp, according to the word of Hashem, where the children of Israel journey, and according to the word of Hashem, where they encamp all the days that the tabernacle that the cloud would rest upon the tabernacle, they would encamp. When the cloud lingered upon the tabernacle many days, the children of Israel would maintain the charge of Hashem, and sometimes the cloud would be upon the tabernacle for a number of days, according to the word of Hashem, etc. And sometimes the cloud would remain from evening until morning, and the cloud would be lifted. Or for 2 days, a month, a year, when the cloud would linger over the tabernacle, resting upon it, the children of Israel would encamp and would not journey, etc. And I don't know, page 783. So here it's telling us that they had no idea how long they would encamp. Let's say they had no idea how long they would be encamped. It could be they would be encamped just that day, overnight, and the next morning they would be leaving already. And sometimes they would be there years. They would be in the same place for years before they would encamp, and they never knew. It was, there was always the decision: do I unpack? Do I not unpack? And I know that there are people that's very difficult for. Some people are very on the fly. I'm kind of like that. Is that like, I don't need to know ahead of time, except in certain areas. Like if I'm speaking, I have to know, like, prepare and be mentally prepared. Yeah. Thank you. So Rabbi Gordon actually came by. I saw him Friday night and asked him, and he told me like, what's going on, because Rabbi Niederman got to first. But yeah, so I didn't speak last week, but maybe Sunday, because Rabbi Slater isn't going to be here again. I don't know. Yeah, I know he's going to be at I heard a dinner on Sunday, but I don't know. I don't know. I just hear that he's going to be.
Just told him,
right. Or they just tell me they don't tell me they just tell me we're going to need you this week.
Does that mean there's not going to be a Talmud class Saturday?
No, there will not be. That's correct.
There
will not be. Okay, so but some people have. So some people need. There are some people though that are very like set in their mindset. And they have to get mentally prepared to change anything. And change is difficult, and it's difficult for everyone, some more than others. And when someone has in their mind that this is what's going to happen and this is how things are, and then you tell them that, like, on the fly, okay, we're going to do this, which is different than the plan. That's, it's like you're taking away their firstborn child. It's something that's like people can't wrap their mind around that idea. And this is how the Jewish people had to live 40 years without knowing what tomorrow would bring, what today would bring, where they were going to be. Are they going to be sitting? Are they going to be traveling? And to the point that the prophet says, and the prophet Yirmiyah says, that so says Hashem, I remember the kindness of your youth, and the love of our when we got married, and when you left when you followed me after me in the desert, in a land that was not in a land that's not planted, where nothing grows, that Hashem's calling it a kindness of our youth, that we followed Hashem in the desert without, once again, that was a great merit for the future generations, that we followed Hashem unquestionably without knowing what tomorrow would bring. So moving on, and then in chapter 10 it discusses trumpets, that they use silver trumpets to summon the people to whenever there was to be any kind of meeting of the elders, or to announce that they were camping, or to announce that they were getting up and leaving and traveling. They use trumpets to summon people, and then it gives the order of how they traveled. And I'm going to skip that for the most part. So on page 785, verse 29, Moshe said to Chovav, son of Reuel, the Midianite, the father-in-law of Moshe. So this is Yisro, who is the father-in-law of Moshe. And the Ramban, I think, says that he's called Chovev because the custom is that when someone converts to Judaism, when someone joins the Jewish people, they choose a new name. And he says that before he joined the Jewish people, it was Yisro. And Chovev was the name that he chose, which means it's like he held beloved. That he held beloved the Torah that was given to the Jewish people.
That sounds like the pandemic.
Chovev? Which
It?
one? On verse 29.
First. Oh, I see it. Yeah,
Chovev, son of Reuel, the Midianite, the father-in-law of Moshe. So Moshe.
Hebrew.
Okay.
COVID.
So the Moshe said, oh, COVID. I missed that. Okay. Now I get it. Okay. So Moshe said, we are journeying to the place of which Hashem had said, I shall give to you. Go with us and we shall treat you well, for Hashem has spoken good of Israel. So Moshe offered to Yisro that to join the Jewish people, come with him, come with us, and we'll treat you well. And in verse 30, he said to him, I shall not go, only to my land, to my family I shall go. That he wanted to teach everything he'd learned to his family. He wanted to, spread the word of the Torah to his family. And in verse 31, Moshe said, please do not forsake us, and as much as you know our encampment in the wilderness, you have been as eyes for us, and it shall be that if you come with us, then with the goodness of which Hashem will benefit us, we will do good to you. So what's the meaning? What's Moshe offering him? That with the goodness of which Hashem will benefit us, we will do good to you. So the Medrash says that he was offering a portion in the land of Israel, because, as we've said before, the land of Israel was divided up amongst the tribes, and amongst depending on how you split it, let's call it the 12 tribes. It was Ephraim and Manasseh were separate. Levi got cities scattered around that didn't have a contiguous territory. And Shimon also had a part within Yehuda's territory. They didn't really have one of their own either. But Yisro, who was a convert, he wasn't from any tribe, so he wouldn't have any portion in the land of Israel at all. He wouldn't have land, and land, especially back then, was wealth. So Moshe was telling him that he would be given a portion in the land of Israel, and in fact, the family of Yisro was given the area surrounding Yericho, surrounding Jericho. Okay. So continuing on in verse 33, they journeyed from the mountain of Hashem a 3-day distance, and the Ark of the covenant of Hashem journeyed before them a 3-day distance to search out for them a resting place. The cloud of Hashem was over them by day when they journeyed from the camp. So it says here they journeyed from the mountain of Hashem, and which we know that's where they were, meaning they were around Mount Sinai this whole time. They could have just said, and they went to, they journeyed a 3-day distance. So the Medrash says that this is to tell us that they left like school children, like a child running away from school. The Medrash says that they were concerned that they already got so many mitzvahs that if they would stick around Mount Sinai, maybe they would get more mitzvahs.
And that would be a lot of work.
And they fled, so they ran away like a kid running away from school after dismissal.
I used to
and
do that
nowadays, my wife says it's
every day.
It's like the teachers running away from school after dismissal.
I used to run away every day.
So Okay, so and it continues in verse 35. When the ark would journey, Moshe said, "Arise, Hashem, and let your foes be scattered. Let those who hate you flee from before you." And when arrested, he would say, "Reside tranquilly, O Hashem, among the myriad thousands of Israel." And this, if you look at the Hebrew, is what we say when we open the ark. It says as the ark is traveling, this is when we get ready for the Torah to travel. When we're opening the ark to carry the Torah to the Bima, so we say, "Vayhi ben Haron, Vayomer Moshe, Kuma Hashem." So this is the source for that prayer that we sing. Okay, so and then it continues on chapter 11, verse 1, the bottom of page 787. The people took to seeking complaints. So if you look at the Hebrew here, before verse 35, Pasuk Lamed Hey in the Hebrew, you see there's like a backwards nun or an upside down backwards nun, and then on the other side, yes, there's also an upside down nun. Right, it's like parentheses.
Right.
And we say it doesn't really belong here. This really belongs earlier when we discussed how they would travel. We discussed that about how when the cloud moved they would travel, and we said we talked about how they traveled by the word of Hashem and the trumpets that they used to summon everybody to travel, and the order of how they went, which tribe went first, which tribe went second. So what is this doing here? This would really belong there. So the Medrash says is that it's put here because those nuns are there. Those are like parentheses say it doesn't really belong here, but it's put here because we want to separate between two different types of troubles that the Jewish people encountered. The first one is what we just said, that they traveled from the mountain of Hashem, that they fled like school children. And then it says that they took to seeking complaints, and then it says that they asked for meat, and there was a great plague because of that. So Reb Shimon Schwab explains that he asked that the first case, when they journeyed from the mountain of Hashem, we don't see any punishment there. So where's the trouble there that we're separating before two troubles? And he answers that that's exactly the point, is we're separating between the two troubles because they're two troubles of two completely different types. He says that there's sometimes that the punishment for something is the sin itself, that the sin itself is the punishment. And sometimes you have an external punishment as a consequence of the sin. And he says, what's the trouble of them traveling from the mountain of Hashem? What happened at this mountain of Hashem, Mount Sinai? We received the Torah. We were chosen as Hashem's chosen people, given this precious gift. Hashem revealed himself. We heard the voice of God commanding us the 10 commandments. And you can imagine the great, incredible spiritual high that we were on, the great inspiration that could have caused us. And when it was time to leave, we left like we were kids running away from school. That itself, that lack of appreciation and lack of feeling, lack of sentimental, when someone's leaving something that they had, a great time, that great sentimental value, they leave slowly. They just like take a minute to, take in this. Who knows if I'm ever going to be right? Just like to reflect and think about everything that happened here and the great inspiration that I had. And but that lack of feeling, the fact that their hearts were so closed to inspiration, that itself was the trouble that we encountered. That was the difficulty that they encountered. And afterwards, when they complained and so then we were actually punished with plagues. So that's a completely different kind of trouble. Okay, so then what happened there? So on the bottom of page 787, chapter 11, the people took to seeking complaints. It was evil in the ears of Hashem, and Hashem heard, and his wrath flared, and a fire of Hashem burned against them and consumed at the edge of the camp. The people cried out to Hashem, Moshe prayed to Hashem, and the fire died down. He named that place Tavera, for the fire of Hashem burned against them. So
why did they complain? I missed something.
That's a good question. So why did they complain? So here the Ramban says, I think Rashi might say as well, is that
taste fatigue.
They were on the road already for 3 days in the desert, and they were complaining from the traveling and the questions like we're leaving civilization, we're away from civilization, we're away from where we were. What are we going to have to eat? What are we going to have to drink? How are we going to survive? And it was just like travel fatigue. But a few things here that the commentaries say is the word the people, usually it refers to us as the children of Israel. Here it refers to us as ha'am, the people, which usually ha'am is referring to the lesser, less distinguished elements. And those were the ones who complained. And it doesn't say they complained. Here you see the translation is took to seeking complaints. The Hebrew is kimis onanim, that means that they were like complainers. It was like they were complaining, meaning they didn't, at the moment, they didn't have anything to complain about. They were complaining about possibilities, about what could happen, not what was happening. They weren't hungry. They weren't tired. They weren't thirsty. They were saying, what's going to be? We can, if we keep this up, we will be tired. We will be hungry. And that is, so if someone was really exhausted, to complain about that is not the biggest deal. But when someone isn't exhausted and they're concerned about what will be, that is troubling to Hashem. And that's why they were punished so severely. Then on page 789, verse 4, the rabble that was among them cultivated a craving, and the children of Israel also wept once more. So here it begins with the rabble, and that affected the people till it's the children of Israel, which means the rest of the people also wept once more and said, who will feed us meat? Right. We remember the fish that we ate in Egypt, free of charge, and the cucumbers, melons, leeks, onions, garlic, but now our life is parched. There is nothing, we have nothing to anticipate but the manna. Now the manna was like a coriander, and it praises the manna. It says how great the manna was. So the commentators ask two questions. First of all, they had the manna. Why were they complaining about meat? They had the manna, which was a great food. And second of all, they had meat, they had animals, they had animals in Egypt that they had taken, they had borrowed things from the Egyptians, they plundered the Egyptians who, when the army came to, remember, when the army was attacking, they were expecting it to be a big, a rout, very easy slaughter, a massacre. And they brought food along and back then you didn't travel with steaks, that would go rotten. You traveled with animals, and they came they brought a huge party, a celebration. So they had animals. So why is it now that they're complaining? Who's gonna? And remember, when Moshe told Paro, "Let my people go," Paro said the men could go, but not the children, or the people could take the animals, but not the children. So they brought all their animals along with them when they actually went. So why is it that they're complaining about a lack of meat? They had meat.
No, that's very interesting. I never thought about that. I thought they ended up with taste fatigue because the man could be anything they can imagine, but it really wasn't anything. It was just substance.
It was substance. The Medrash says it did taste like anything you can imagine, but taste isn't everything. Taste isn't everything. There's texture, and there's also the look. It's a lot of taste is in your mind, and even if something does taste exactly like something else, but if it doesn't look like it, you don't have the same experience. The presentation, like you go to a restaurant and they bring you out the most delicious thing that just looks like slop down on the table. It doesn't taste as good because
no rule here. First thing that a person eats with is their eye.
Yes.
You can serve them SOS.
Yeah.
But if it looks good, then they'll be happy.
Yes. Sir.
First thing they eat with is their eye. Then they eat with
their nose, and then their mouth. Yes.
Not necessarily the nose.
Right. Right. And Fred, that's just Fred saying. The first thing that you eat with is your nose. Is your eyes. And it didn't look like what they were eating. They wanted meat. And I just want to move on. Give me 1 second. So, and another thing they say is that, so Rashi says that it doesn't say that they had a desire again. It's, where am I? It said they cultivated a craving. That means it wasn't a natural craving. The Hebrew is hisavu taiva. That means they desired a desire. And Rashi says that they just wanted to complain. If they were looking to complain, so they did have meat, but they wanted to complain, so they found something to complain about. But they really didn't have, meaning they could have slaughtered their own animals. They wanted meat provided to them. They didn't want to slaughter their own animals. They just wanted to complain. But also some commentaries say that the man might have tasted whatever they wanted, but it was a spiritual food, and they didn't have that satisfaction of being hungry and fulfilling that need and feeling full. That they didn't have. it was like let's say if a person got a blessing that they'll never be hungry again. They have an IV in there, and that gives them all the nutrition they need, and they never have to eat. You could imagine that you're never hungry, which is nice, and you have all the nutrition you need, but you never have that satisfaction. There's an incredible satisfaction of being hungry and filling up of that meal and feeling that heaviness of completing that meal. It's a great physical feeling that they lacked with the man. The man gave them everything they needed, and it might have tasted like anything they want, but it just gave them anything they needed, but nothing more. And and because of that, they were lacking that feeling.
Every time I eat, I get sensation. It's really a release of endorphins.
Yes.
Which is, enzymes, hormones that create satisfaction.
Right. And that's what they were looking for. They're looking for that
right.
physical pleasure that was missing when they had what they needed to stay alive and healthy, but they didn't have that physical pleasure of fulfilling a desire with something they really desired and feeling satiated. So here we are. So then it continues in verse 10. Moshe heard the people weeping in their family groups, each one at the entrance of his tent, and the wrath of Hashem flared greatly, and in the eyes of Moshe it was bad. So Moshe said to Hashem, why have you done evil to your servant? Why have I not found favor in your eyes that you placed the burden of this entire people upon me? Did I conceive this entire people, or did I give birth to it, that you say to me, carry them in your bosom as a nurse carries a suckling to the land that you swore to your forefathers? And so the commentaries say, what does he mean? Like, did I give birth to it? So I saw the commentaries say that a child naturally trusts a parent. There's a certain amount of that, like a child, unless God forbid, there's a tremendous breaking of that trust. A child trusts a parent in a way they'll never trust anyone else, that they know that the parent is out there looking for the wealth. Once again, God forbid, sometimes parents break that trust to the point, and until they're teenagers at least. But even a teenager knows that there's that address to go back to, and they really are truly looking after their welfare. But he's saying that, and a child will follow a parent, but he's saying, I'm not their parent. I didn't give birth to them. I didn't raise them, and I'm lacking that. So they're not following me. Don't trust me. In verse 13, where shall I get meat to give this entire people when they weep to me, saying, give us meat that we may eat? I alone cannot carry this entire nation, for it is too heavy for me. And if this is how you deal with me, then kill me now, for if I have found favor in your eyes, let me not see my evil. And meaning Moshe understood that the people were going to be punished severely, and he didn't want to see that. And Hashem said to Moshe, gather me 70 men, and you'll have 70 great men to assist you in leading the Jewish people. So I saw in the commentaries, I think it was the Beis Yitzchak, said that why would 7, if they need meat for all the people, what's 70 more people going to help? And the Beis Yitzchak said, I think, that Moshe, the reason why Moshe was saying he can't get meat is because Moshe understood that the man was there, he was the leader, and he was the one whose job it was to keep the people supplied with food. That's the job, one of the most important jobs of the leader, from what I understand, like a general. That one of they said, what did Napoleon said, an army marches on its stomach?
That's right.
I know it was Napoleon or one of the great generals in history said like army marches on their stomach.
That's right.
And
well
that's one of the most important aspects of leadership are the people's physical needs taken care of? Do they have food? And what does it get there? The firstest with the mostest, but they have to be fed, or else you don't have people to get there. So Moshe understood that the man was coming in his merit, and the food that Hashem was supplying was channeled through Moshe. And since he was so spiritual, he was completely removed from the physical, he wasn't capable of supplying the people with physical food like that would make them healthy. That's how Moshe understood. So Hashem said that here are 70 leaders to assist you who are great men, but not to the same extent as Moshe, completely removed from the physical. So they, in fact, would be able to in their merit as being part of the leadership, that they would be able to bring the Jewish people meat as well, physical food as well. And now, and in verse 18 on page 791, to the people you shall say, prepare yourself for tomorrow, and you shall eat meat, for you have wept in the ears of Hashem, saying, who will feed us meat? For it was better for us in Egypt. This is what the people said. So Hashem will give you meat, and you will eat. Not for 1 day shall you eat, nor 2 days, nor 5 days, nor 10 days, nor 20 days, until an entire month of days, until it has come out of your nose and becomes nauseating to you, because you have rejected Hashem, who is in your midst, and you have wept before him, saying, why did we leave Egypt? Okay, so that's the beginning. So someone asked me today, Eddie Rabbi, asked me that why does it give so many details here? Not 1 day, not 2 days, whereas in verse 19, not for 1 day you shall eat, not for 2 days, nor 5 days, nor 10 days, nor 20 days, for a whole month. Why is that not for a whole month you shall eat meat? So he answered that oh yeah, so the Or Chaim, so I found the Or Chaim answers this. Yeah, it's coming out of your nose from So yeah.
You want to know something? That can actually happen.
When you laugh or cough, I know it. There's a channel between the two.
I
I know
once
very well.
expelled a tablet through
Oh,
my
yeah.
nose. It went down and it sort of got hung up.
Okay, yeah. I agree. Yeah, we get the point. The grisly details. Okay, I'll leave it at that. But yeah, and we've learned about the connection between the nose and the mouth. But yes, so the Or Chaim says that when it says that when Hashem said, not for 1 day you shall eat, for 2 days, for 10 days, for 30 days, a whole month you have to eat meat. He says this was not a permission. This was a commandment, that you are commanded to eat meat until it comes out of your nose. So people might think that what's the point of this mitzvah, the point of this commandment, as it's clear, I'll maybe mention this later, is that to get this, they desired physical desire to get it out of their system to the point that that it's ruined for them. Meaning you wanted it, you're going to have it until it's completely ruined for you to see that this physical desire, it was felt like such a good idea at the time. And now that they have it, they can't even bring themselves to look at it. And to recognize that that's how physical desires are, that the desires for the physical might feel like a good idea at the time, but it could get to the point that once again, that like it's disgusting to you, you don't even want to look at it. So he says there are some people who just have it 1 day and they're done with it. Like, I don't want any more. I had my fill of meat. There's some people who take 2 days. Some people take 5 days. Some people would take 20 days. But here the Torah is saying, all of these people, you can't stop. Yeah, the mitzvah is for everybody for a month, and it has to be completely repulsive by the end of that time.
Depends on how there are many recipes.
But well,
you can serve it.
Okay, there's only so many ways to, what is it? Fry an egg? What's the expression?
For me,
yeah.
Well, there's.
Yeah. Okay, let's go. Yeah. So we got to finish. So why did we? So that's the answer. So it continues in verse 21, and this section the commentaries really go to town on. Page 793, verse 21. Moshe said, 600,000 footmen are the people in whose midst I am. That means there are 600,000 men from 20 years of age and up. Yet you say, I shall give them meat, and they shall eat for a month of days. Can sheep and cattle be slaughtered for them and suffice for them? Or if all the fish of the sea will be gathered for them, would it suffice for them? And Hashem said to Moshe, is the hand of Hashem limited? Now you'll see whether my word comes to pass or not. So they asked, what was Moshe's question? Hashem told them they're going to have meat. What is he questioning us? How can I do it? What kind of question is that?
He's not going to be the one that's doing it.
Exactly. So some commentators answer that in fact, that he understood that Hashem said, where is it? What's the Hebrew? He understood that this was to be a physical, this was not going to be in a miraculous way. It could be because He didn't think that Hashem would perform a miracle for the people when they were, for physical, to satisfy their physical desire. He didn't think that Hashem would make a miracle for that. And if, to take care of our needs, we have miracles, but for physical, just to like a wrongful desire and wrongful complaint, Hashem will make a miracle to satisfy this. He didn't think he would do that. The Kleyaka, though, says that it was actually, his question was that when it comes to desire, it's limitless. He's saying the people were looking to complain, and whatever you give them, they're going to want more. They're going to be looking for more. If not this, something else. They're always going to be looking for more. And there Hashem's answer is the hand of Hashem limited? Hashem saying, I could get that. They're going to get it until they're sick. Exactly. They're repulsed by it. And they say, enough, stop, please. And okay, so it continues in verse 24. And to the first question, that would a miraculous, would Hashem make a miracle for a wrong request that's, to satisfy their physical desires? So the answer there also is the hand of Hashem limited, meaning that if Hashem doesn't give it to them in this case, the people will think that in fact Hashem was not capable of giving them meat. That's something that is beyond Hashem's ability, God forbid. So Hashem said in this case it has to be demonstrated that whatever they have is because Hashem wills it, and if they don't have it, it's because Hashem doesn't want them to have it, not because it's beyond Hashem. Okay, so now Moshe left and spoke to the people, and they had these. It continues, verse 25. Hashem descended in a cloud, spoke to him, increased some of the spirit that was upon him, and gave it to the 70 men, the elders. When the spirit rested upon them, they prophesied, but did not do so again. So they had a prophecy when they got this inspiration from Moshe. And 2 men remained behind in the camp. The name of one was Eldad, the name of the second was Medad. They were supposed to be from this group, but they did not receive prophecy. And so why were they left out? Let's see if I can get that. Yeah. So it was supposed to be, there are 12 tribes. So it was going to be that so each tribe would contribute towards the elders evenly. That would be the fair way to do it. But 70 doesn't divide evenly into 12, because 12 times 6 is 72. So there were 72 that were sent to be selected, and there was to be a lottery to see which of the 2 would be left out. And but Eldad and Medad, in their humility, felt that they were below, they weren't at that level of all the others, and they stayed back and they didn't go. But in spite of that, they still received prophecy. So the spirit rested upon them. They had been among the recorded ones, like we said, but they had not gone out to the tent. They prophesied in the camp. The youth ran and told Moshe, the youth is here being Yeshua, and he said, Eldad and Medad are prophesying in the camp. And Yeshua, son of Nun, the servant of Moshe, since his youth, spoke up and said, my Lord Moshe, incarcerate them. Or yes.
Would you say the child who ran to Moses was?
I thought it was Yeshua. I remembered that, but it could be I was wrong, because it doesn't imply that. No. So Rashi actually brings, I'm sorry, I'm mistaken. Rashi brings that it was Gershom who was Moshe's son, and that's the Medrash Tanchuma. And then afterwards, there's Yeshua who said Kalaim, which ArtScroll translates as incarcerate. It literally means destroy them. And Rashi brings a medrash here or the Gemara says that it would destroy them means that put the needs of the community on them, meaning make them in charge, give them responsibility, and that itself will destroy them. But why was Yeshua upset? So one medrash says that they were prophesying that Moshe would die and Yeshua would be the one to lead the Jewish people into the land of Canaan. And Yeshua being Moshe's student was angered by this, that they would have that chutzpah. And others say that, I think the Kleyaka says that the people, that it was be inappropriate if, let's say, a prophet received a prophecy about the future, a vision about the future, if they were in front of somebody who was a greater prophet, they would withhold and allow the greater prophet to speak it out. The same way that with, let's say, it's prohibited for a Torah scholar to make a halachic decision in front of his Rebbe. And for example, here, if like Rabbi Slatus is there, if someone asked a halachic question, for me to answer that would be a chutzpah. That he's the rabbi, and for me, it's not my place to be answering that question. And here, Yeshua felt that Moshe was the great prophet, and for other people to prophesy in front of him was a chutzpah.
And he's not around. This is not a question, but if he, like this weekend, if he's not around, somebody asked you a lot of questions.
Yeah, if he wasn't around and someone asked me a lot of questions, I may answer it.
Right.
And even then, if it's something on the complicated side, which I might for myself, I might decide. But I also feel a complicated question should go to the rabbi, unless someone's uncomfortable. There are cases where people are uncomfortable, and that I have to take by a case basis. But for the most part, he's the rabbi of the community, and that's where questions should be going to, for the most part. Right, a basic question that's not, meaning there's questions and there's shilas. A question is like, do you know the answer or not? A shaila is more like when there's a judgment call involved. Where there's a judgment call involved, for the most part, I'd be uncomfortable answering. I might answer in certain cases, but I'd be uncomfortable because that's his place, it's not my place. And so Yeshua felt they shouldn't be doing it. And Moshe said to him in verse 29 in page 793, are you being zealous for my sake? Would that the entire people of Hashem could be prophets? If only everybody could be prophets, if Hashem would place his spirit upon them. So Moshe, in his great humility, was forgiving of other people having prophecy and prophesizing in front of him. So now in verse 30, Moshe was brought into the camp, and he and the elders of Israel, a wind went forth from Hashem and blew quail from the sea and spread them over the camp, a day's journey this way, a day's journey that way, all around the camp in 2 cubits upon the face of the earth. The people rose up all that day and all that night, and all the next day, and gathered out the quail. The one with the least gathered in 10 chomers, a tremendous amount, and that's the least anyone got. And they spread them out all around the camp. The meat was still between their teeth, not yet chewed, when the wrath of Hashem flared against the people, and Hashem struck a very mighty blow against the people, that the people who had complained in the beginning were killed. He named that place Kivros HaTaifa, the burial of the desire, physical desire, because there were buried the people who had been craving. And from Kivros HaTaifa, the people turned to Chatzeros, and they remained in Chatzeros. Okay, and now the last thing in the Parsha is when Miriam and Aaron spoke against Moshe regarding the Cushite women who had married, for he had married a Cushite woman. They said, was it only to Moshe that Hashem spoke? Did he not speak to us as well? And the Medrash says, what was this? What were they speaking against him? So the Medrash says that Miriam saw Eldad and Medad, who were they? Yeah. So prophesizing, and she knowing that I might be a little off here. I didn't look at this. I didn't get to the end of the Parsha. But okay. So Tzipporah and Moshe were husband and wife. But Moshe had separated from Tzipporah because he had prophecy, and as it says, we're going to see that he had to be available to answer Hashem's call at any moment. And a person who's has relations with a woman is ritually impure, and would need to go to the mikveh before before it would be appropriate for him to be ready for prophecy. So, and Miriam had heard this and she said that don't we have prophecy too? Aren't we holy as well? Hashem spoke to all of us. So like, do we all have to separate from our spouses? So it continues in verse 4. Hashem said suddenly to Moshe and to Aaron and to Miriam, and this was the suddenly was a rebuke of her to show that Moshe had to be always ready, never knew when the word of Hashem would come to him, had to be prepared. And he said, Hashem said, you three go out to the tent of meeting. And the Medrash says that they said suddenly, so they had immediately to start running, looking to purify themselves. The three of them went out. Hashem descended in a pillar of cloud and stood at the entrance of the tent. He summoned Aaron and Miriam. The two of them went out. He said, hear now my words. If there shall be prophets among you in a vision, shall I, Hashem, make myself known to him. In a dream shall I speak to him. That a prophet has some kind of unclear vision. It might be a vision they have in their sleep, in a dream, or a vision that needs interpretation that they have to understand. Not so, in verse 7, is my servant Moshe. In my entire house, he is the trusted one. Mouth to mouth do I speak to him in a clear vision, not in riddles. At the image of Hashem does he gaze. Why do you not fear to speak against my servant Moshe? Saying that Moshe should be unquestioned, and no, you can't compare anybody to him. And in verse 9, the wrath of Hashem flared against him, and he left. The cloud departed from the top of the tent, and behold, Miriam was afflicted with tsaras like snow. And Aaron turned to Miriam, and behold, she was afflicted with tsaras. Aaron said to Moshe, I beg you, my Lord, do not cast the sin upon us, for we have been foolish. We have sinned. Let her not be like a corpse, like one who leaves his mother's womb with half his flesh having been consumed. The Medrash says that someone with tsaras is it's as if they're dead. So in verse 13, Moshe cried out to Hashem, saying, please, Hashem, heal her now. And Hashem said to Moshe, were her father to spit in her face, would she not be humiliated for 7 days? Let her be quarantined outside the camp for 7 days, and then she may be brought in. So Miriam was quarantined outside the camp for 7 days, and the people did not journey until Miriam was brought in. Then the people journeyed from Chatzeros, and they camped in the wilderness of Paran. So even in Miriam's disgrace, she became a mitzvah, she got saras, but it says that the people did not journey for 7 days until Miriam was brought in, that she was given that honor, that she was honored at the same time that everyone waited for her. That the whole Jewish people waited those 7 days for Miriam. Reminds me when I was in yeshiva in Scranton. So Scranton, the airport is not especially big. It actually expanded in my time there, but it's not a big airport. The joke, and mostly we're flying on smaller planes. They were either like turboprop, like little propeller planes, and you would walk out on the tarmac and climb up the stairs to get on the plane, like one of those.
I remember that.
So there was one time that I don't remember what happened, but I was late and security took a long time, and the security person, like when they finally let me through, told me like, hurry up, you just run because the whole plane's waiting for you. So the joke always was, and it's there's a whole plane full of people waiting for you. It's an honor in a sense. The joke always was that they needed you to pedal. These little planes, they can't leave. They need you to pedal. But anyway, so this was at the same time as her disgrace. It was a great honor. And I just wanted to say something about the Haftarah also, even though I mentioned it, but it's one of my favorite Haftarahs. This is also the Haftarah for Hanukkah, for Shabbos and Hanukkah, that we saw it discussed with the menorah. It's on page 1182. And it begins with, first of all, sing and be glad, O daughter of Zion, for behold, I come and I will dwell among you, etc. And then it has an incident in chapter 3, verse 1. He showed me Yeshua the Kohen Gadol standing before an angel of Hashem, and the Satan standing on his right to accuse him. Hashem said to the Satan, Hashem shall denounce you, O Satan. And Hashem, who chooses Jerusalem, shall denounce you again. This is indeed a firebrand rescued from the flames. And this is Zechariah, remember, prophesizing at the time when the Jews were returning from the Babylonian Persian exile to the land of Israel to rebuild the temple, or to build the second temple. And he's saying this is indeed a firebrand rescued from the flames. At the time the Jews who were left behind in the land of Israel had lapsed. I'm sorry. And they had married non-Jewish from the non-Jews around them. And he's saying Yeshua is a firebrand rescued from the flames. He remained righteous. And Yeshua was dressed in soiled garments as he stood before the angel. The angel spoke up and said to those standing before him, remove the soiled garments from upon him. Said, see, I've removed your iniquity from upon you, clothed in fresh garments, symbolizing that his sins were purged and he was pure, right? And then Hashem commanded him to walk in the ways of Hashem, etc. And then we had that prophecy that we spoke about, that he saw this menorah, that had everything was taken care of. It had 2 olive trees. It had olive trees on the side with pipes going from the olive trees into the lamps. So it was like a perpetual motion machine. It was constantly replenishing on its own. And to that, in verse 6 on page 1184, he spoke up saying to me, "This is the word of Hashem to Zerubbabel," saying, and like we saw in the Parsha, that Moshe's prophecies were mouth to mouth. They were clear. There was no interpretation, no understanding. Hashem told Moshe what was to be understood. Here, he saw this vision that needed an interpretation. He needed to understand it, and the angel was explaining to him what it meant. That he said that this is the word of Hashem to Zerubbabel, who was the descendant of the tribe of Yehuda, who was the leader of the Jewish people, saying, "Not through armies and not through might, but through my spirit, says Hashem, master of legions." The same way this menorah filled itself up, didn't need human intervention. He was saying that Zerubbabel will be successful not through his own strength, but through Hashem's spirit. "Who are you, O great mountain? Before Zerubbabel, you shall become a plain. He shall bring forth the main stone." He shouts of beauty, beauty to it, that he will lay the stone of the Beis Hamikdash, of the temple. Okay,
All right.